Mm-hmm.
I know today is going to be a good day. You know how I know?
How?
Because Huey Lewis and the News came on the radio this morning when I go to school, and that's like my indicator. If
That's
Huey,
how you knew that you have the power of love.
and it was the Power of Love that came on today.
Well,
Bum,
it's a
bum.
curious thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Makes one man weep. And
Makes another man sing.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How is everybody today? I'm
Woo!
my voice feels a little fried today. I've got some sinus gunk going on because my grandchildren decided to share their little snotty cold with me.
They're so sweet like that.
So sweet like that.
sweet.
So sweet like that. But we have a fun topic to talk about today in this week's Fireside Chat. By the way, we are trying to standardize our schedule for Fireside Chats, and looks like every other Monday. Is that kind of what we landed on, Abby?
Yeah.
And then the alternating Mondays, we're going to do a workshop. So next Monday, because that will be the opposite of this Monday, I'm going to be doing a workshop on what exactly is my my title? I had
How to start a book.
How to start a book. So everybody wants to write a book, but how do you actually start it? And so for fun, Abby and I's Fireside Chat today is going to be how to start a book. Like, so you've decided that you are a writer, okay? Because I think we've established this before. If you write, you are a writer. Now, that doesn't mean that you finished a novel, that you've published, all of the things. But if you write, you are a writer. And so how do you go from this vague feeling that I think I have a story to tell, I've got something that I want to communicate, I've got something that I think will be entertaining, fun, challenging, whatever the emotion is that you're shooting for, you think you've got it in you. How do you start? What's the first step? Because sometimes the most crippling fear is just getting, off the starting block, getting the ball rolling. And then once you get some momentum, it becomes easy. But a lot of times the hardest thing is getting going.
Well, I know one of the questions that I've heard people say before is, how do I know if my idea is good enough? Like, how do I know if this idea is good enough to sustain a book? And
right.
The best answer to that question that I have ever heard, I'm going to give credit where credit is due, was my first book coach, Jenny Nash, who said, can you obsess over that idea for like a year? Can you lose sleep over it? Because if the answer is yes, it's good enough to write a book about.
That's right. That's right. That's a great litmus test. Yeah. Is it a book that you cannot not write? Mm-hmm. Is it something that you will, and I hate to be overly dramatic, but we're all writers here. That's kind of our job, isn't it? To be overly dramatic. If you're lying on your deathbed and this is a thing that you will regret not doing, it's a book that you have to write.
Yeah. So do you know that I have outlined several books that are just kind of sitting there on the computer, and a couple of them, like, they're there and I'm like, they're whole, they're complete. Like, I think it would make a good book, but I don't think about them constantly. But there's one of them that I have outlined that I think about every single ding dong day. And I feel like that's got to be the one. And the funny thing is, that's the one that, like, when we had the talk with Steve the other day from Athon Books, he was like, don't mash up too many genres. And I was like, well, I guess that YA rom-com that takes place in space that I've been dreaming about, maybe I don't need to do that one. But guess which one I can't let go?
Right.
That one.
The other thing, and we've talked about this, we've kind of danced around it some, but sometimes you take the advice of people that know what they're doing in the industry, and sometimes you have to go against that advice. But You need to know the advice and you need to know why the rules are the rules before you can bend them and do something unique. Because if you're just willy nilly grabbing stuff and you don't understand what it is that people are expecting, so you don't fully know how to subvert those things in a way that people will go along with you. Um, yeah, I feel like I'm missing something in the chat.
I just said, not to be cheesy, but throw a few hearts our way, people, because that's
Yes.
one of the things we're trying to do too with Mondays and moving our sprints is we're trying to get YouTube to notice us a little. So, Doug says he's going to get carpal tunnel from all the hearts. We actually can't see what you're doing on the back end, just so you guys know. So there could be like a whole flood of hearts and we have no idea.
Right. Also, if you use Facebook or Twitter or X or what's the other one, Blue Sky, whatever the things are, if you use any of the social networks and you think there are people that you're friends with that could benefit from this chat that we're having, share a link over there and let them join us on the live stream as well. That would be a great thing to do.
I just want to show this comment because we've gotten a couple. Abby, I would read it. And not just that. Oh, the redhead 23. Also, oh no, wrong one. Although the hardest thing getting started, no truer words have ever been spoken. I was going to say the redhead writer said, write it, Abby. I'm like, yeah, maybe
write it, Abby.
Write it. So
yeah.
We need validation just as much as you guys need validation, even though I think you've written like 9-10 books at this point. I mean, I'm still like, I don't know, should I?
Should I do it? Should I do it? Yeah. I will say this too, while we're talking about that, is that if you've got an idea that won't let you go, write the ding dong book, because you can then take that written book and you can let it sit for a little bit and you can come back and then you can have an analytical look at the book and see, does this thing meet these 4 genre expectations? Can I really whittle it down to 2 genres with elements of this other thing? And then you can edit that into the form factor that will best perform. And if you don't have a written book, you never do that, but you could write it and then mold it into the thing that it needs to be. That's much easier.
So, and if you're a new writer, let's talk about this for a hot second, because nobody told me when I first started writing that words don't expire. Like they're not milk.
Yeah.
They don't expire. And there's 2 different kinds of new writers that I've sort of encountered. There are ones that are like me. I suspect you were sort of the same way, Hank, right? I wrote a book and then I wrote another book and then I wrote a 3rd book and then I wrote a 4th book, right? So in the span of, I think 5 years, I think I ended up writing 4 books that I used to learn. And those books never saw the light of day. But I've realized now I can turn around and go back to those. And each one of them was just missing a little something that I had to learn along the way. Now, that's one kind of writer. The other kind of writer I've seen are those people who it takes them 10 years to write their first book, but they've probably written that book at least 10 times.
Yeah.
Trying to get to the point where they learn every iteration, they learn what I just learned in different books.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter which one of those types of writers you are. The trick is you got to write the ding dong book, whether it's 5 different ding dong books or 1 ding dong book that you write 10 million times.
Right.
You gotta write it.
Well, and I feel like we've talked about this before too, but there's this strange thing that happens that people, when you're writing your first book, you feel like you're pouring everything into it. And you're like, I'm going to say everything I've ever believed about everything. And I'm going to just leave it all on the field with this book. And then I'm not going to have anything to say for the rest of my life because I'm going to say everything I've ever wanted to say. And this weird thing happens when you're about 60% through this book where you're inundated with more ideas. And then you're like, oh, these new ideas are sexy and I want to chase them. And you've got to just write them down, finish the ding dong book that you're writing, and
Mhm.
then come back and choose the next great idea. You'll never run out of ideas.
Oh
Trust
my
me.
gosh, no. And like taking an idea, once you've done it once,
Yeah.
taking a tiny little kernel of an idea and being able to feed it, it gets easier. Like
Yes.
you see, it's not everything feels like a big deal when you're writing that first one. And it's not until you figure out the rhythm
Right.
that you realize it's not a big deal, but you're juggling so many pieces to write a book, so many craft pieces, so much project management, like, and you're learning so much. You can't get it all on the first iteration. It's like
Yeah.
near impossible. I have to say, and if you're writing a book for the first time, or even if you're not writing a book for the first time, but you want to follow along with us, we're getting ready to start a whole new YouTube series
So exciting.
with our friend Brooke here called First Novel Problems. So Brooke is a new Dabble staff member, and she is not yet an author. So she is a writer. She writes blog posts. She writes technical copy. She's good with words.
Okay, so everybody stop right now. Give Brooke a flood of hearts to welcome Brooke to the team. You're going to be seeing a lot of Brooke, and she's already doing monstrous things for what we're going to bring you guys. So everybody give Brooke a flood of hearts right now.
And that teacher that she is scared of, I wonder who that could be, Hank.
Oh, I wonder who it could be. Middle school Maven. Middle grade Maven, excuse me. Okay, so let's dig into this a little bit, Abby. One question that, of all the author interviews that I do, one question that I love to ask people is, and the reason I love this is, one, because I'm fascinated by the topic, and two, I'm fascinated by how people will answer it. And what the thing that I love to ask people is, there's a moment of creation, and like A Little Trouble Goes a Long Way, your book that recently published. One moment in time, that book did not exist in any form or fashion, didn't exist. And then one day, either a character walks onto the stage of your mind and you're like, who are you? What are you doing? Or if I understand your creative process kind of the way that I think I do, you're thinking, what if you took this thing and mashed it up with this thing? And then all of a sudden, this explosion happens. And then in some form or fashion, that book does exist.
Yeah.
And then it's your job as the writer to dig it out of the ground, excavate it, pull it out, dust it off, polish it up, write the ding dong book. And then it does exist. But the moment I'm most fascinated with is that moment of creation. What is the spark that ignites this book in your brain? How does it come alive? So is it when you're thinking about comps? Is that how?
That's me. But
Yeah.
this is me. So when I first started thinking about, and for me, by the way, I tend to let ideas marinate for a really long time before I jump in.
Yeah.
They trip and stumble their way.
Right.
That's kind of what I feel like I'm about to describe, because I
Yeah.
get an idea and it's always just kind of like half formed, but I can't let it go. So in the case of A Little Trouble Goes a Long Way, that first coach who I referenced earlier in this call, Jenny Nash, had said to me, you're going to write a book about the misfit animals on your farm one day. And I was like, she's probably right, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And it sat for a while. And I was like, I'd like to write something that's a little like Charlotte's Web, because, I mean, who doesn't love Charlotte's Web? I mean,
right.
Me as a kid, I don't think I ate meat for a while.
There's an inside joke in my family that Charlotte's Web is vegan propaganda.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I grew up to be an adult, and I got pigs, and I had a really hard time with pork chops for a really long time.
What
Um,
about bacon though?
bacon, that was hard to take that one off the table. So
Right, right.
let's just be honest. But yeah, I knew I wanted it to be like Charlotte's Web, and when I was a kid, was obsessed with the book The Borrowers by Mary
Mm,
Norton. So those
yeah.
little tiny people that live in the walls and they borrow things from the big people. And I loved that idea that like inside the walls of my house, there'd be like little tiny tables and chairs made out of like thimbles and rubber bands and things that were, taken from around the house that we never missed. And it created this whole world inside the house. And I knew I wanted to do something like that, but I didn't know how it was all going to click
Yeah.
until I thought of my third comp. And it's that third comp that's always magic. And my third comp was the Dukes of Hazzard. So I was like, what would happen?
Absolute genius, by the way. To talk about a left field pull, but it totally works.
I mean, you don't think about those other two books and then think
Yeah.
Dukes of Hazzard. But the moment I thought about the Duke boys in their car, and they were the good guys, but they were also the outlaws, I was like,
Mhm.
that's what I need to shake up my barnyard. And the moment I thought of that, the whole story, like for years, I hadn't been able to put this together. And that third comp, that's the moment that boom, it became something.
Bo and Luke, not Coy and Vance. If you know, you know.
I am not going to lie. I rewatched so much Dukes of Hazzard while I was writing this book. And Hank, someone I know who reads it
so
out loud
terrible.
to his grandchildren, probably sees that every one of those characters has a Dukes of Hazzard equivalent.
Yes. Yes. It is. I've been reading it to my granddaughters, and I'll just laugh, and they'll just, what are you laughing at, Papa? Never mind. Never mind. It's you wouldn't understand.
What about for you? I mean, we've talked about your first book an awful lot.
Well, and it always comes back to the same thing with me. It's always a character, and it's always like this weird vignette of this character. Like I'm eavesdropping on watching something happen to them. Almost every book I've ever written starts that way, and then I'm like, who is this character? What are they doing? What are they motivated by? What's the what's the thing that makes them exist in this world? It always starts with a character, sometimes a pair of characters, but it's almost always one character and then another one will come along sometimes. But every story I've ever written starts that way. It starts with a character with some sort of weird circumstance that they're in, and then I have to figure out why they're in this circumstance, and that's usually the genesis of the book. And then a whole cast of characters pops up around them. And
your brain works so fast at that part of the process. Like, I mean, you've done it enough times at this point. But I feel like so often you have said to me in the year and a half that we've worked together, oh, I got this idea for a book. And the next thing I know is like, boom. Like, I want whatever crack you're on because that just.
It's, I think it's from 30 years of playing with ideas in my head and never pursuing them, and then one day deciding I'm going to do it. So I've just got all these banked up ideas. I don't know, or it's mild schizophrenia. I'm not sure.
So does anybody, like, to put this in the chat and we'll share some of these ideas. Does anybody have an idea or a premise that like you've never been able to let go of, but it's not necessarily gone anywhere? Like, do you have any advice, Hank, for somebody that has like this idea like I did? I want to write Charlotte's Web and the Borrowers, but I don't it's just not gelled for me yet. Do you have any advice for like how can you make it gel for someone?
Well, I kind of take it practically. If I've got this character that intrigues me, and I'm like, who is she? What is she doing? I normally come up with a couple of questions initially.
Mhm.
Um, what does she want? And what is she afraid of? So, what is it that she generally is driven in this world to be, to obtain? um Maybe it's that she wants to um have her mother be proud of her, or maybe it's a in the instance of my novel Murder Town, is that Stu wants to be successful so that he can earn the love of his girlfriend. And it's not him earning the love, but it's him feeling like he's worthy to have something to offer her,
Mhm.
because he wants to marry her and he doesn't feel like he's worthy of her. So he needs to accomplish something so that she will think that he's a worthy, you know, uh, candidate for, a life mate, whatever. It's I'm not saying they have to make sense, and they don't have to. um like, you could talk your character out of this want. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be something that is a true desire, but it has to be true to them. Like, Stu was driven by this need to prove himself to Audrey. And what he didn't realize all along is that he was already accepted by her,
Mhm.
but he felt like he needed to prove this. And that's a burning desire for a 22-year-old young man. And so that was the thing that drove him, is that he needed to be a success for her.
You are so much nicer because you're like, "Oh, like, what's their desire? What's their drive?" I'm like, "How can I wreck their life?"
Oh,
That's
well, that comes next.
it.
That comes next, but you need to know what drives them first. And like Dawn and I always say when we're watching TV, we'll pick apart plots of movies and TV shows and be like, well, first off, have a character that the audience loves,
Mhm.
and then as the writer, stick them in a tree and then set the tree on fire. And then we're off to the races. Then we've got a story.
I mean, we might get banned by YouTube just for saying things like this, but we're just talking about our characters,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. That's
Really talking about it.
You can do horrible things to fictional characters. It's totally allowed. You can do it. People will just let you do it.
It is what keeps us from doing them in real life
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, and then people will pay you for doing horrible things to fictional characters.
Yeah,
How great is that?
yeah.
So, yeah, yeah.
Um,
How can I that's, Shannon said, "Oh, whoops, sorry, click the wrong one." That's where my mind went to. How can I ruin their lives?
how can I
And
just
as the writer, that is your job, to ruin their lives and then to see if they have the character to find their way out of it. And that's where story comes from.
So here's an interesting question for you because I've thought about this a couple times. Once you get a couple books under your belt, whether they're out there in the world or not, obviously you have something to say,
Right.
right? And if I look back on every book that I've ever created, there is an underlying theme, and it's always about accepting yourself for who you are, accepting
Yeah.
your own beard, accepting, whatever it is about you. And if I am stuck with an idea and I don't know how to move forward with it, believe it or not, I go back to that because I know at the very core of my writerly being,
Yeah.
that is the thing that I'm exploring. That
Right.
apparently I will never run out of words for because it's at time and time again, that's what creeps up. Do you have a theme in your body of work? Because
Um,
you've in a couple different genres. So
yeah, I think there's you put me on the spot.
good.
Yes, I think this thing, like, that Stu is wrestling with in Murder Town, is a reoccurring theme. This young man trying to find his place in the world, trying to be something, trying to be someone worth caring for, to be a man of character, to be something that people can depend on. And like I like writing those kinds of stories.
How many ways that can actually be explored. And so if you're just starting to write your first book, one of the things that I like to encourage people to stop and think about, and again, this makes sense for me coming from a background in fine arts,
Yeah.
because you go to the canvas or get behind the camera or you pick up the chisel and the hammer or the lump of clay, there's something you're trying to say.
Yeah.
You're just not necessarily using words.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing, writers need to think about it too. Like, what is it that you're trying to say about life in general? And even if it's not something that like you have to like bang it into your reader with a hammer, like, and be real preachy with it, there's something inside you that you're trying to say. I'm sorry, I have to laugh because when you keep talking about your stew, I keep thinking about my stew, and you said, well, his desire is just for, my head went pizza. That is what my first book is about. The duck who wants to eat pizza.
Yeah. And sometimes it's no more than that.
I mean,
Yeah. And I 100% agree with what you're saying about trying to think about the theme of your writing.
Mhm.
I'll push back just a little bit on that.
Mhm.
If you wrestle with that question for more than a day or two,
Keep
you
moving.
might be putting too much into it. Because a lot of times I don't think about that in the beginning, but when I finish writing, I look back on it and the theme emerges.
So,
Sometimes I go into it thinking that this is a question I want to wrestle with. A lot of times I don't, but it's always there. It's just my subconscious mind
okay.
working on it. So
So,
I would just say that if you're thinking about that, if you come to it quickly, wonderful. If you don't know and you're just not, you're sometimes you can think too much about questions like that and psych yourself out, and then it's one more reason to not write the ding dong book.
yep.
So if it's something you're wrestling hard with, just put that aside. It'll come to you. Trust me.
Artists are so good at embracing that what my subconscious meant to do
Yes.
sort of piece.
I
And
I am a tried and true believer in that, to the point that I learned when I was a young man that if I was wrestling with a problem, that when I would go to bed, I would tell myself, I don't know how to solve this problem, but tomorrow morning I'll wake up and I'll know the answer, and just put
it
it out
worked.
of my head. And then invariably during the night, my subconscious mind would wrestle with it, and I would wake up and I would just know the answer. And to this day, and I've just learned to trust that my backroom brain can work on it while everything else is going on.
So I know at one point when I was writing my first book, one of the things that Jenny said, and I think we might have even done a podcast about it, potentially 2 or 3,
Yeah.
where she would say to me, like, you have to learn how to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
Because I think my background in the arts, I was constantly thinking about, well, what am I trying to say? Am I saying it right? Am I putting enough of it out there? Am I, and she'd say to, get out of your own way. And the funny thing was, I was like, well, if you tell me how, like, get out of your own way and go with the flow with painting, I know what that feels like. I didn't know what that felt like.
Right.
Writing. That took me a while to learn. And that was a really hard lesson for me.
Yeah.
Get out of my own way.
Get out of your own way. Sometimes you just need to find the fun in what you're doing and just write for the fun of it, and just trust yourself that all those questions will answer themselves along the way. That's one reason why usually before I always start writing my novel in earnest, knowing the beginning and the end, and usually a few waypoints along the way. And then I can start in earnest, but I always know where I'm going, always know where I'm beginning from. But before I get to that point, and I don't consider this really starting the writing because this is my exploration process, is I'll have this character and I'll generally have kind of an idea of what they're doing, what it is they want, kind of, and I'll just start writing a couple of chapters and I kind of get a feel for their voice. Some of the setting starts coming into focus in that. Usually some of the cast of characters will start to form in that, and in that couple of chapters. And sometimes these are chapters that are part of the book, and sometimes they're just exploration. But I give myself the time to just write this character for a little bit, and that's how I learn them. And then I start laying out, okay, this is my plan for it then. And in earnest, the suburb of Chicago. I don't write a lot in Chicago, but maybe in the future. But in that kind of exploration, I try to answer what is my character's big want, and then usually what are they afraid of. So in Murder Town, this is just fresh on my mind, so I'm going to use these examples. Stu wants to earn, or what he considers earning, his girlfriend's love and devotion. What's he afraid of? Well, obviously not earning that.
Mhm.
And then at some points in the book, the thing that he fears most is success. And that is a valid thing because, sometimes achieving the thing that you're working at changes your life. And are you ready for that change? So that is a valid point as well. So
Like Rapunzel entangled.
yes. Yes.
What do I do now?
Right. What do I do now?
Yeah.
And so that's you. What do they want? What are they afraid of? Those are two big points. And if you know those two big points, you can start laying out a story from there.
So that kind of hits on one of the things we figured we would talk about today is like, are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Do you outline? Like, what do you do before you start writing? And the thing that makes that question so hard is that everybody does something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are lots of different ways you can outline and, approach a book. Like, I mean, I always sit with I have 2 copies of this one on my desk and I can't figure out why, but I really like it. So maybe that's why I have 2 copies of Libby Hawker's Take Off Your Pants. But there's all different ways to do it. But the truth is, if you've never written a book before and you don't really know, don't know if it works for you or not, actually your strategy is pretty genius, Hank. You kind of have to know the beginning. You kind of have to know the ending, or in general where you're going, even if you don't know the specific exact end point. You know kind of what you want to write to. Are we going to have a happily ever after? A happily ever after? Like, what are we going for? You kind of got to know a point or two on the map along the way. And then do a little free writing and figure out, who is this person that I'm working with?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Christina said, for her, if you're writing romance, that actually sometimes, if you're writing genre, and romance is a big one, there are a lot of expectations that readers are looking for. You kind of got a template. You get to follow that template. And I love to put bounds on my creativity. So Hank knows this. I think there is nothing more terrifying than a blank canvas, a blank piece of paper, a blank notebook, a blank Google Doc, a blank Dabble project, a blank anything where you can do anything you want. Let's just go be free. Write whatever we want. There's too many choices.
Yeah.
That's too many.
Yep.
Start to narrow me down and I can get wildly creative.
Yes. Build yourself a framework to work within.
And if you identify with that theory, like if that sounds like it makes sense to you, then go pull out something like Save the Cat.
Yeah.
Which is a good generic template that they've essentially, they get these templates, and I can't remember what the guy's name was who wrote the book about Hero's Journey. He didn't come up with Hero's Journey, but he like wrote the book that everybody knows. Is his name Christopher or something?
No.
Thinking lunch with him, and I cannot believe I cannot remember his name. It's because we're here on camera.
Yeah.
But he said to me, you realize that all of those templates are all just calling the same thing by a different name.
Yeah.
It's just a rhythm to storytelling that some really smart people have analyzed more stories than you could possibly imagine and found that there is a rhythm to them. And they just put it into words that writers can use.
And romance is a great example to use because romance readers are very particular about their tropes. So there are a number of tropes or kind of, this is going to sound worse than I mean it, but like prepackaged story templates for romance. So for instance, and I'm drawing a blank as soon as I say I'm going to give an example. Like forced proximity is one trope where you've got two characters and they're forced to be in a room together for a long weekend, and they're maybe enemies to lovers. So they're they don't like each other to begin with, but they're in forced proximity, and by the end of the weekend, they're madly in love with each other. So everybody knows how this is going to end, but the restraints that you put on yourself then make the magic happen, because people that love enemies to lovers will buy book after book after book that are all enemies to lovers. We know how they're going to end, but we're here to see how you're going to make it happen. And they will buy that same trope over and over and over again. And as long as you can deliver it in a new and meaningful way, they will continue to buy them over and over again.
Fake dating. That's
Fake
my
dating. Thank you.
I love fake dating. A good YA rom-com with fake dating, I'm in. By the way, my YA rom-com set in space.
Yeah.
Fake dating. So you know.
Love it. Love it. So romance is a great example of that, because there's such well-defined tropes and people that are unashamed about their love of those tropes. And the same thing exists for all other genres, but romance is just an easy explanation of those because they really wear them on their sleeve. But the same thing is, you got in science fiction or in fantasy. How many different fantasy stories can you tell of the farm boy who is really the the chosen one, and he doesn't know it, and he's adopted by this evil step parents, and but he doesn't know he's really the chosen one, and he runs into this wise old mentor in town one day, and he takes him under his wing. How many times have we read that story? It's the same thing, but out of that you get Lord of the Rings and all these Wheel of Time and Sword of Shadow, and on and on and on.
Yeah, absolutely. What else you get on your list of questions?
Well, let's see. So I always start with what does my character want? What are they afraid of? What do they want? What are they running from? Is a way to kind of decide on their fear. And then what does your character believe that is not true? And a lot of time this, like for Stu, the thing that he believes that's not true is that he has to earn Audrey's acceptance and love. That is not true at all, but that's the thing that drives him. That's not true. And then one thing that you can there's a contradiction that you can begin with. You can just kind of sketch out, my character is mostly blank, but underneath he's blank. And then you can start to kind of dig through your character's character, and he's mostly this, but underneath he's really this. And so you can start to kind of uncover character motivations, what drives them, with the fears that come from that, and that helps you to kind of get your arms around your character. And then once you have that main character and you figure out what they want, what's keeping them from what they want, then you've got the elements of a story starting to unfold there. So for you, how you start with comps, but when do characters come into that comp idea?
I try and design my characters to serve the story that I'm trying to tell. And I usually start more with plot, believe it or not. And I really sort of struggled with, if I start with an emotional arc, sometimes I have a hard time thinking about a plot that's going to fit it.
Yeah.
But if I start with the plot and I make it make logical sense. So you and I have talked about before that because of that piece. So because of that, this happens. And because of that, this happens. And because of that, this happens. So I like to sort of lay out my plot first. And then I try and figure out what kind of character that plot could challenge. And then if I sort of know a beginning and an ending point for the emotional arc, I realized you've got to weave it into your plot somehow. So why does this happening matter to my character? So that's the piece that I think I struggled most with as a new writer. I could write an emotional arc separate. I could write a plot separate. Trying to tie them in and loop it around so that they connected and made sense was difficult for me.
Yeah.
And so I still sort of struggle with the plot. But, this is a great question that Brooke asks right now. What is an emotional arc? So the easiest way for me to explain it is, if a character wakes up in the morning and they have a cup of coffee and they go out and check their mail and they got to check from their grandma for $100. And then they go to the mall and they spend it on a great shirt. And then they get a nice lunch and then they come home and then their best friend calls and they have a good laugh. And then end of the day, they climb into bed in their softest pajamas and they read a good book and they fall asleep, right? That's not actually a story because nothing has happened.
Right.
Like, you're only going to be invested in a story when there is some big problem, because your brain is putting you in it as a substitute to try and figure out what the heck would you do in that situation, right? So the emotional arc is essentially like the life lesson that a character learns along the way. So like what I said earlier, that all of my books are about embracing who you are and accepting yourself and accepting your own weird. Usually my lesson has to do with something along those lines. So, Hank, can you explain it any better? Or
I was agreeing with everything you were saying. I like to think of it in terms of the emotional arc is the things that happen to how the character responds to things that are happening. The list of things that you described were just the day-to-day happenings to that character. None of them challenged your character. None of them forced a change. Yeah. But when prompted with a roadblock that forces a character to go this way or that way, to respond to it, that in some way that brings about meaningful change, that's character arc. How is your character going to respond or react to something that then causes your character to do something out of the ordinary, become something they weren't before, something along those
Now,
lines.
you can have flat arcs too.
Yes.
Think about characters like James Bond.
Right.
In a thriller, character arc doesn't mean quite as much. James Bond is always James Bond, cool and suave and under control no matter what the situation throws at him. That's not why thriller writers or thriller readers go to thriller books.
Right. And there's an argument to be made that those are more plot-driven books, not so much character-driven books. And there are things you can quibble about there, but in those types of stories, the plot is the main driver, not so much the character. Although there are character things that we fall in love with, but that's beside the point.
And in mysteries, usually, now Murder Town is different, but if you think about like, you know, Sherlock Holmes, he doesn't really have much of a character arc himself, but the people around him change and grow.
Yes. Yes. And you could argue that Sherlock has a character arc. It's just a very slow evolving character arc. He changes over what 30, 40 books. Yeah. It's just not a huge change, but at the end he's a different character than he was in the beginning. It's just very slow and methodical. So
oh my God. And in children's book, my favorite in children's book is when you see the character and they're learning and they're learning and they're learning and they're learning. And then by the end of the book, they've just looped right back around.
Yes. Yes.
They're so stubborn and frustrating. And I love that. So.
Yes. Yes. Here's a question for you. Do you think about characters' backstory? And we're talking about in the beginning. We're not talking about when you're 80% through with the book and these things have evolved and built themselves. But in the beginning, do you think about the character's backstory, or do you think more about interiority? And I'll give you an example. Okay. So traditional things that you might think about for a character's backstory. What's their favorite color? What's their zodiac sign, or, you know, something like that? What's the name of their first pet? And then, you know, maybe you fill out a 12-page character sheet with all of the things. And I do none of that. I have never done that. Never will do that as far as I'm concerned. But here are things I do think about. When my character walks into a room, what's the first thing she notices? What does she lie about? So in all of her relationships, what's the one thing she will never tell anyone the truth about? What book does she reread often or throughout her life? What is one thing that she kind of lingers on and will repeat? What repetition is in her life? And then what's the one thing they would never say out loud? So I start with questions like that instead of thinking about, you know, building character sheets and, you know, all of the
questions you think about are things that relate more to the story and how your character is going to react to things. Things like, what is your favorite color? What was your first pet? What was the name of your first grade teacher? A lot of times that doesn't have any bearing on your story whatsoever. And people can go down the rabbit hole of trying to flesh out everything that has happened to the character between birth and the day that the story starts. Right. When a vast majority of that stuff is probably it's just fluff. It's not going to be specific to the story that you're trying to tell. That's why I think sometimes I got to get into the story a little before I can figure out what that character needs to do or be to make the story work.
Yeah.
Instead of like at the beginning. But again, you guys, this is what makes teaching writing so hard. There's no one way to do it. Hank starts there and I don't. That's the piece that I've got to get into the story a little. But to be fair, Hank, you're kind of doing it before you get into the story with that pre-writing that you have, that you sit down, you write a couple of scenes or a couple of chapters, or you just do some free writing about character and who they are to figure it out.
Yeah.
Before you move forward.
Right. Right. And like I say, I always know and always know after my pre-writing phase. Sometimes I have had books that I just knew from the instant this character walked onto the stage of my mind. I knew who they were, I knew what they wanted, I knew where they were beginning, and I knew where they were going to end. I knew the final sentence of the book, and I wrote to that final sentence. That has happened more than once, two or three times, but not always. Um, Sometimes I have to work at it to come to that spot, but sometimes it just drops like an epiphany, and I just know it. And I've figured that this is something that I've noticed, uh, along the way or something, and I've just kind of held on to that character in the back of my mind, and I've just learned to trust the process and to trust that when the pieces come together, that my brain will let me know that it's time. And that just comes with experience and with just doing it enough to learn to trust yourself. And you can't get there other than just doing it. Just do it, do it, do it. And then Hank, could we create a template guide of the questions you use for the community? It could be a great, absolutely, absolutely. And next Monday, I'm going to teach a workshop on exactly this: how to brainstorm your novel. If you only have a kernel of an idea, how do you bring this up to a good starting point where you can start writing your novel? And this time next week, we're going to explore this. And these are some of the things I'm going to talk about. And like the workshop I did a couple weeks ago, I'll post the slides and stuff over in Dabble U and give you some resources where you can work on that.
So Athena says, to be fair, I wrote the entire backstory just to understand their psychology. Sometimes you got to do it.
And sometimes you do have to do it.
You do it. And sometimes, like Shannon says, the character sheets are just for your own benefit and that's it. And let's be real. Sometimes just figuring out what their favorite color is and then making an illustration where they're wearing that color shirt, sometimes it just makes it real for you.
Sometimes your character's favorite color is blue, but maybe what you don't know is the reason is because their mother was wearing a blue dress on the day she died. And
that's a little deeper so that it's
but sometimes you don't know that, but taking a look, and that's where this pre-writing for me becomes so handy, because that's where I start to discover these things. Like, she obsesses over the color blue. Why does she always wear a blue wristband? Well, it's because the dress, it's a piece of the frayed hem from her mother's dress the day she died, or whatever. That I look for those little things that can solidify that trait for this character. And a lot of times, if you just give yourself the freedom to write it, those things will come to you.
I'm looking up.
Thank you guys for all the great comments today.
All right. I was trying to figure out. It's not, by the way, it was Joseph Campbell's journey, but that's not who I had lunch with. Joseph Campbell's long dead.
Yeah.
It's the guy that wrote the book about Joseph Campbell
and Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is what George Lucas used to write Star Wars.
And the guy that I had lunch with was from the film industry. So I cannot think of his name. So
the miracles of live television.
Such a miracle. Well, Vogler. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you. So we've only got a few more minutes. This hour has flown by. I'm kind of looking through my notes here to see, at what point do you start thinking about setting? Because, some people, especially fantasy writers, can fall into this deep abyss of world building and creating worlds and all this. And we had this great conversation with Steve last week where he said that that world building is an outflow of character for him, and that he doesn't spend a lot of time world building, that as the needs of the world crop up out of the character, that's when he writes that. How do you feel about world building? For instance, in your borrowers meet Dukes of Hazzard, um, how did you start thinking about that world, and did it really come out of like the world that these characters would inhabit?
Yeah. I mean, does it serve the story? I mean,
Right.
that's what was hammered into my head from book one for me is what it doesn't matter what it is, character, setting, world building, anything that's in there, it has to serve the story. And so, because like A Little Trouble was a very nostalgic book for me to write, those were based on things from my childhood. By the way, I have a very early memory of getting a set of Daisy Duke underoos for Christmas. I mean, we're talking that book was so nostalgic for me that I set it on my great grandparents' farm. And so I just tried to pull up details that I felt like served that vibe for me
Hmm.
because I was trying to write to a vibe. And that's what I did. But then, like with the YA rom com set in space, I mean, I can see where you can get a little carried away with the world building because it's fun.
Right.
But when it becomes, there's nothing wrong with world building for fun, for the sake of world building, if that's bringing you joy and contentment and you don't care if anything ever comes of it, then do it up. But if
Right.
you want to get that book on a shelf, there has to be a point where you're like, all right, I have to be dedicated enough to say, I'm going to draw my line in the sand. What I have now is good enough. As I write forward, if I find a hole, I'm going to fill the hole then. But I'm not going to spend years and years and years building this world only to never move forward and get to what I want, which is a book on the shelf.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'll just add a couple of things in the same way that we add specificity to our characters. Like we talked about this, a character who wears this blue armband and there's a thing attached to it. Setting could be find some specificity for that setting. For instance, you could say, the setting is a small town. Well, that doesn't tell us much, but you could say it's a small town that was built around a paper mill, but the paper mill closed in 1987 and now nobody talks about it. Okay, what's going on there? Why is nobody talking about it? What's the economic fallout of this town that was built around this thing that's no longer there? And what are the circumstances that pop up around that? And so now you have questions, and anything that poses questions gives you an opportunity to write into those questions, to solve those, to answer those questions, to things like that. So that's a fun little exercise that I do.
I was trying to pull the thread, and then I felt like on Meet the Fockers when he milks the cat, and I had to make myself stop.
Think of setting as a place that's doing something to your people, not just sitting as a backdrop for your people. Think of it as a place that's doing something to your people. Let's see. 3 layers: what you touch, smell, hear, taste, specific enough that you could walk in blindfolded. Then you've got the social layer: who has power and who doesn't, who gets served first at the diner, who got cut from the church directory and why. Then you've got temporal: what happened here before your story started, the flood of 73, the girl who disappeared in 94, the business, the interstate killed. These are questions that you can ask about your setting that give it character, give it life.
Oh, sorry. I'm just clearing my throat, not to
No,
interrupt. Just
I'm just scrolling through my notes here, looking for anything I can cram in this last minute. So
well, Well, we should cram in the last minute, Hank, because they need to come to your workshop on
Yes.
next Monday.
Yes. Next Monday at standard podcast time, 1 o'clock, we're going to delve deep into this. I'm going to have a workbook that I'll give you guys that gives you a place to ask these questions and explore that and do some pre-writing as you go. But it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about character, setting, plot, the questions you need to ask yourself to get off of the starting block and get that story rolling. Because once you get rolling, you can build momentum, and then the writing is so much easier. But I'm going to give you a way to give yourself permission to get started.
Yep. I like the way Keo says, channel your inner Doug and shamelessly plug your workshop, Hank. So
there's not enough room in me for me and Doug.
You don't want to come to Hank's workshop, everybody, next Monday. That's not a Doug voice. I got it.
Sorry.
I'm doing.
Sorry.
Sorry that the dog ate your finger there. Old Doug, Dougie Fresh.
Oh. Thank you guys for joining us today. This was a lot of fun, and it's always more fun when we pop in and see your lovely faces asking questions and keeping the chat popping off. We do appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. So, all right, we'll see you in the community.